Hello, cruel world. It's your old buddy Will Gorley here, and it's 12:30, and that means it's time for TED Ed and my presentation for the YRDSB EdTech Camp on air. We are live, and hopefully more people will be joining in as they find their fine cup of coffee and log in. So what we're going to be doing for the next hour is sharing the entire probably gamut of the work we're doing with TED Ed around the world, what I've been doing, how you can use the TED Ed lesson platform, and as well a great chance to ask some questions. Hopefully some of my fellow TED Ed educators from around the world will also be chiming in, and if they have any questions that we will get it going. I am just trying to organize a couple of little social media things and prepare some backup support from our friends at the YRDSB DLRTs, such as Kim Polishuk, who I'm sending a direct message to the live link one more time, which is there, and she can find that in the inbox of her Twitter account. All right, so I am live on Twitter, and I'm live on Google Hangouts on Air, which is part of YouTube. And so big shout out to the YouTube people and TED. They have a great relationship working together. If you are looking at my channel, it is currently on something called Control YYZ at gmail.com. And you can see that in the chat comments. If you want to connect to my presentation, I'm going to be actually flipping over to my presentation really quickly, and that way you can get a sense of what we're going to be doing for today, and I can walk you through that, and then you don't have to see my face. So this is what I look like when I wake up in the morning. I just want you to know that you can trust me. I'm with TED Ed. I have fresh coffee, and I have some fancy slippers that I was sharing out earlier. And well, let's get going. And if you have a question, take the time and pop it in, and we'll gladly go through anything you have to ask. All right, so let's go. Oh, don't want to do that. There will be a link to the presentation. Here we go. Well, welcome. Here we go. It's this is the bumper link that we wanted to share. My name is Will Gorley. I am a teacher in the YRDSB, and I am happy to share with you one of my passions, something I've been involved with since 2013, and that is TED Ed. In the summer that year, I was fortunate enough to see a tweet. So just a little tweet in August of 2013 asking if anyone was interested in being part of TED Ed, hosting a TED Ed club. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. I love TED. I use TED in the classroom and my lessons. And so why wouldn't I want to find out more and how I could do it? And so just through Twitter, we've created an amazing community of teachers around the world that are all now part of the TED Ed clubs and TED Ed family. Here's a link to my entire slides. Go back to that. A link to my slide presentation, and you can see anything. If you want to slow it down, you want to look at all the resources that are there, you have access to that. So please feel free to click on that and make a copy of it for your Google Drive. And if you want to share that with your staff and your colleagues, please do. So today's focus is really on how TED Ed in your school makes better students. And I'm going to do it in two phases. The first phase is going to be talking about how a TED Ed club can make a wonderful opportunity for your students to discover their voice, discover their passions, and make it into a presentation using the curriculum that is free through TED Ed to have a TED Ed club in your school. It also develops a skill, this presentation literacy, which especially in Ontario is an important component to our media literacy mark. I think having students give effective presentations is an amazing way to make your class come alive. In fact, it really did come to a head one year where I actually fell asleep during a kid's presentation. I was just so bored. And so I blame myself for being tired. I blame myself for being under-caffeinated. But I also, and I blame myself first off for not having the brains to equip those kids to make more interesting presentations. And then, so it really came back to me on what I could do better. And so having this resource has changed my instructional time on getting students into developing great presentations, effective presentations, being critical consumers of spoken and shared presentations, slide decks. Gone are the days of me or anybody else wanting to read slides that are shared. And in fact, that's why I might just rush through some of these slides. That this slide deck was created for dual purpose. One was that it could just be used as information, and I would kind of pick the plums from it. So today we're going to look at what is TED, what is TED Ed, how to sign up for TED Ed, how can teachers use TED Ed, etc. And I'm really not going to read all those to you. So what is TED? So if we look at that, what is TED? Usually this is the part where I would give out little candies or some PD swag. And TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And it started in 1984. Here I go again. Oh, the total pro here. It was started as an educational conference, not an educational conference. In fact, when I first learned what TED was, I always thought the E was for education, and like many people that come to our sessions, they say education as well, and then they realize, no, it's entertainment. It kind of makes it an incongruous thought. But every TED conference you get to, there's always like some of the most phenomenal entertainment that you could imagine. And so when you consider how your students have such diversity in their abilities, so if you're holding a TED event or just a way to demonstrate understanding in your classroom, you can think of how some students are really good with language, and others are great with technology, and others are good with visual spatial. And then again, there's others that could just sing their understandings with a song. TED does stand really well inside of how to use the TED style talk or the TED Ed club to present a way to assess and a way to share ideas on terms that are relevant to the student. So TED Ed is kind of a new arm for TED itself, and well, we could make this into like a game. How about how many times we say the word TED? I'm going to try to be good about it. And what it is has been divided into two arms. First was the how to discover your passion and share it, and the other is how to find lessons and share them with educators from around the world. And so this slideshow is going to be put into two parts. So let's start with TED Ed. Are there any questions that, by the way, I could answer as I go through this right now? I want to make sure that we honor everybody that is part of this. I appreciate those that are on board. I'm having a little bit of troubles, I think, seeing what questions are being posted and where it's being posted. So I'm going to duck out here for a second and just come back. And if you are watching live, you can enter the chat section, and hopefully, if there are any questions, either that or send them to me via my Twitter account, and I will try to respond to them there. Okay, So far, no good. All right, so let's get back to the screen share then, because nobody needs to see this any day of the week. So, as I say at the top, I think TED-Ed is the best when it's used to amplify student voice. Yes, they develop presentation literacy skills. This past year at Quest, we were able to really take the stage by storm and have 10 students share what was on their hearts. And I had the privilege of working with those students from various high schools and grade schools in the Wire DSB. And the tough part was when we were first starting, they said, okay, you have five slots, you have 1 hour on day one. And I was having to basically deliberate which students I wasn't going to take when all 10 were creating amazing messages. And so my heart was really happy when they actually offered a second day at the Quest conference, where I knew then all 10 voices would be heard. So it's a nice problem to have, but it is going to be a problem as you create these clubs and these opportunities. You will want every voice to be heard. Not every voice may make it to the TED-Ed YouTube site, but I think the bonus of all this is that students themselves are going to be given a chance to express themselves, develop those ideas, build up those relationships, develop a community, and then grow from that on a number of levels. I find that this year is the first year I've actually invited grade 4s to the classroom, to the TED-Ed Club, only because they're so willing and they're so able to share. And so I wouldn't let age be the limiter. In fact, there's there are some grade 2 students at my own school that probably are capable of giving a pretty solid 2 or 3 minute TED-Ed talk and blow the minds of anybody in the room. And so that's exciting to know that in the future we're going to have these savvy and engaged speakers. So the other part about TED-Ed clubs is it becomes this moment where grade lines get crossed. And so I like that about it. There's so often that we're stuck in seeing students just by their expiry dates, that they're always in their classrooms. There's never really any interaction between the clubs, between the grades. And so this is something that levels the playing field a little bit more, so that students get to know each other. There's a camaraderie that comes with it. We eat lunch together. I really encourage like intergrade conversations and try to get students not just being in their little compartments by age group and by their friend group, so that hopefully they build something that's beyond. When you go to university, of course, you start to meet people of all ages and they become friends, and it's not just based on one common factor, which was your date of birth. I've also known that students that are former students from TED clubs are leading clubs in their high schools now. They are taking charge. Basically, they don't need to run. They don't need they need a teacher, of course, to help them run the club, but they don't need the teacher to run the club. So these students are making a difference in their high schools now that had been part of our TED-Ed programs at the different schools I've started them at. And recently I've had the pleasure of hearing how some of them are now being asked to speak at other events to talk about mental health, share their stories because of their strong presentation skills. And so these are nice things to have on a resume. I hate to think of kids in high school developing a resume, but what a nice combination of skills and opportunities to mesh the two. So if you start a TED-Ed club, it's a flexible program. Usually it's a 13-week curriculum. It's free. You sign up. I have a link included in this presentation on how you can sign up. It takes about 10 minutes to fill out the application. I've been doing these this is my 6th club cycle. And every year I have to fill out the application, so don't feel bad when you have to renew. They'll want to talk to you. They'll want to spend a little time in your telepresence. We'll do a video call. Many times it's really just catching up and getting to know one another with some of the most amazing, kind, and encouraging educators that you'll ever meet outside of the YRDSB. So the goals of TED Ed Club are very straightforward: to put students first and their voices right behind it. And so when you think about recent events in the United States and how you see that the student voices are loud and clear, you can see that there is a real place for an organization like a TED Ed Club in every school, where we connect the educators and the students with one another, and then moreover allowing those students a place to be fearless when they share ideas and to develop them with the encouragement and support that is necessary. So this is this panel here is a very this is how I think. It was from my Beckett Farm Public School TED Ed Club from a couple of years back, but I always start the meetings in this kind of area. We just kind of brainstorm an idea. So I just wrote down what the students were throwing out, and the students basically every time we've done one of these never fail to amaze. Think about what it takes, what makes an idea worth spreading. It's meaningful. It helps change or can help others, helps the world see things through different eyes. I think in this day and age where we spend so much time trying to float our own messages, it's really important that we take time to listen to the others that are being put out there, and then that broadens our own thinking and maybe changes it. And even thinking about building on ideas, I really like.
I believe that
Okay, so this is our little first interstitial. I'm going to check what's going on in terms of any questions, and I'm going to play this video that came from TED Ed this January. It said what their students taught them in the last year. So enjoy this.
I believe that everyone is a teacher and must teach. It don't matter what age we are, what gender we are, or what work we do. There's always something exciting to learn and teach at every moment. Do you agree with my statement?
Fandoms can come in every shape, every size, every genre.
I started a reading club with my friend Pinky and asked them questions based on the stories we taught them.
When I sing, I feel like I can take on the world. I feel like I'm untouchable.
Why is it that our use of solar energy today is still very minimal?
Will the children of this generation feel the thrill of driving?
Doesn't it hurt to be excluded? Haven't you felt the same way before?
How many of you have ever really felt awkward or embarrassed at some point in your life? Almost every day, says Petra.
So the pace and way of parts of you don't have to change because someone says so. The pace and way of parts of you can stay because that's what makes you special.
People often think introverts are shy when in fact we are way more than what you see on the surface.
And the one thing I wish they knew about having dyslexia is this doesn't make me stupid or unintelligent, but a strong, smart person who's very capable of succeeding in school and overcoming any obstacle in their life.
I did one surgery, and another, and another, and another. I'm here today. And if you ask me, would I want to go back in time and prevent this from happening? The answer is no.
Schools need to have concrete anti-racism policies that detail what racism is, what a student should do if they are a witness of racism, if they are a victim themselves, with accurate and fair punishments for the perpetrator.
I'm not a terrorist. I'm not an uncivilized savage. And I am not an angry protester. I am just a 16-year-old girl who wants my family and my future and my generation to always have access to something as simple and necessary as clean water.
More people are concerned with why women stay in abusive relationships than why men are abusing them.
All of you know that children have right to play safely. We as Shangilia, we believe that skateboarding is a great way to play.
I want love to be the biggest message of my speech. How can we, as human beings, spread love through the way we act?
It's easy to tell someone that you agree with or someone that you're friends with to be themselves. But it's hard to tell someone that you're kind of iffy about that they should be themselves too. And that's what we need to start doing.
At some point, I started talking in French, and they were talking in Dutch. And yet, I had understood every single thing they had said. Everything. Because we spoke the same language. Fun.
What I'm really trying to hone in here is that not everyone can do everything, but everyone can do something.
Why don't we create a social network or an interaction platform for kids?
That's not going to inventing a machine that could boil water without plugging electricity.
Today, I'm going to share a few insights on how a connected device to detect silent attacks using bioelectrics.
All your small good works combined can and will change the world.
We don't need to have superpowers to be heroes, but we do have to be kind to be a hero. What if we start practicing for the day when we can be a hero? It's just up to us to utilize that small spark of I want to be and change it into a burning and raging inferno of I am.
Humans are passionate creatures. It's in our nature. And when we love something, we want to express it. We want to draw what we love. We want to break up what we love. We want to dress up based on what we love. When we combine community and passion, you get a fan.
It's not only me who can do this. I believe that every one of us can teach and everyone can make a change of whatever they want.
Oh, I just love that video. And I think that it speaks a lot to the fact that there's so much going on in our own students that many times we fail to kind of connect with it because we're so busy hitting curriculum markers, which, yes, I know for all of those that are listening in Ontario and beyond, that those are important. But I always believe this, without having our students focused as the first priority in terms of what they want to know, what they want to say, we're not going to be able to deliver much curriculum. So I think about it in this term. If I am able to let my students know that I'm interested in them and their ideas, they're going to be interested in me and my ideas. And more importantly, when we have that buy-in, that collective buy-in, we're also getting that kind of community established, that it's not just a one-way system. So this is a bit bigger than just teacher-student relationship as far as I consider. It's more like teacher-teacher and student-student relationship, because each one of us in these TED clubs, each one of us in the classroom, whether we're just working on our presentation skills, is a teacher. Each one is a student. None of us is as smart as all of us, as the expression goes. I always think of it that way too, because many times our clubs are led by our students. Once we get the ball rolling, the students themselves, I saw a TED Talk, I want to share it. I have an idea, I want to share a poem. I want to share a picture I made. And it becomes this collective place where there's an excitement about it. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I was speaking with a club leader who was a little bit down on the fact that only 4 kids had signed up for their club. And I thought, what a great opportunity to empower 4 amazing leaders rather than to look at it from, well, that it's not a success. And so whether you have 4 or 44 in your club, you need to think about it that there's an opportunity, and it only takes one little spark to light an amazing fire. So this link here, and you can click on it in your own time, will get you right to the sign up. And you can start your own TED Ed club. So once you do that, you know, expect to be a couple of weeks. When I started, there were 10 clubs. We started it at Sam Chapman Public School, Go Champions, in 2013. And there were 10 clubs as a beta test. By January 2014, there were a couple of 100 clubs. And now there are thousands of clubs around the world. And the neat part about that is that I've been able to meet some amazing people in countries that you would never, ever think would have a TED Ed club. And recently I connected with teachers in Nepal, Uzbekistan, Syria, Bangladesh, Korea, Poland, Zambia, and those are just to name a few, and their students. In fact, we've had some great teleconferences, just chatting, talking about lessons, talking about student ideas, and just really sharing encouragement. So once you sign up for a TED Ed Club, you get this whole curriculum. It's 13 weeks. And this is just a little sneak peek. I'm not allowed to share it out publicly, so I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what it entails. Put it this way. In each lesson, there's going to be a TED Ed video and a TED Ed lesson. A TED Ed lesson has the content, some guiding questions, perhaps some suggestions on what you could do, but really this is a very open opportunity. You do not have to be robotic and follow it letter for letter, word by word. I know I have not. Many times in the TED Ed Club Facebook support chat, which is a private chat for TED Ed Club leaders, there's questions about, hey, what should I do? And ideas are shared from people from across the globe. In fact, there's so many educators that are supportive on this that it's hard to keep up with how many are now part of this very amazing and growing family. But it starts off with the first thing, what are you interested in? I mean, isn't that the question that we always want to do when we're to answer when we're sparking in the classroom? Like, as mentioned in a number of different occasions, and I've spoken on it myself at the Wire DSB, is, you know, if you could study anything on your own terms, what would it be at this moment? And that led to the project that we created called the Agents of Change. And that was really an extension of the 20 Time or the Genius Hour learning that's going on around the schools around the world. But think about it in this term. What are you passionate about? You know, people would be able to pick out that I'm very passionate about TED Ed. And I'm also very passionate about making sure that students are heard. And that in that combination, having a place to have students share their ideas, share their passions, discover what makes them tick, and then know that they're valued for all of that is really, it's not just a passion, it's just like a total bonus of life and as an educator. So, I mean, really, I'm in an amazing opportunity of life. I get to teach kids, I get to watch them discover and grow, and then I get to be have a front row seat at them sharing with the world that's waiting to hear their ideas. So I like to focus on point number 2, what makes a great idea great? And this is what comes back to my classroom. So when my students are asked to do a presentation or to ideate something in a lesson, that's one of the questions. Why is your idea a good idea? And then basically they have to sell it and prove it. And I'm happy to watch them squirm a bit. And I think it's a question we all need to ask ourselves. What makes a lesson great? What makes someone's talk great? And what makes another talk good, right? It's also a great point to point out to students that it may not be great off from the start. It may take time. It may be several iterations. At NASA, as I've taught to my grade 6s a couple of years ago, they had something called the IRL, which is the implementation readiness level. And basically, that goes from IRL 1 to IRL 9. And at NASA, most ideas die at IRL 3. So if you have an IRL number and you get to 3, you're average. But to have an idea to make it past IRL 3 is pretty phenomenal, knowing that it's almost an implementable idea. I know that kind of it scares kids, but it also should challenge them to realize that not always their first idea is their best idea. It may be the one that they're sparked on, that they will work through, but it could be the idea that gets built on in another direction, or maybe sparks another idea and then can either be developed fully or put aside for a while. It could be a not yet moment. But in that learning, there's also the resilience piece that, oh, it didn't work. Well, what worked about it? What didn't work? How do we autopsy that, biopsy that, and move on? So once that happens, the ideas are flowing pretty good. I've had students come to me with ideas that I would never have thought of myself, and here a few years later, they're in fruition. One boy, as an example, about 5 years ago, came up with the idea of a P-powered generator. He must have heard about it, how the electrolytes in urine were able to generate a small amount of energy in the right, in the right situations. And sure enough, at our big rock concert this past year, they were basically doing a news feature about how the washrooms were powering this generator with the urine from the porta pots. So here's a kid in grade 5 years ago on the cutting edge of sharing some technology in the energy sector. So it's just those little moments like that where you would just kind of, how did that little guy or person, pardon me, how did that person put out that idea and make it so so palatable, when most people would just hear the talk about P and turn and run away. Another student was terrified to share her talk about why school sucked. And I thought that if she couldn't share it with our group, then she really must have been very nervous about sharing it, because our group was so safe for her. So she eventually shared it in the privacy of our group. But I was really hoping that she would come and actually give that talk to everybody, that her ideas were very sound. They weren't disrespectful. The title was in your face, but I thought it was worth listening to. And in fact, I've been trying to talk some other students into writing talks in the same vein about why school sucks. Because I'm sure that if we take that to heart, we realize that we care about something so much that we'd like to make it better, not just complain about it. And that's all. That's the idea of student voice too. It's not just to whine about things. It's also to empower people to do better, to make things better. So one of the talks I use to share with the groups I share with is by Clint Smith. And I'm going to use that one right now as a little bit of a break here, and then we're going to jump into something else. And here's Clint Smith. So if you still need another reason to start your own TED Club, I'll share this one about the power of voice.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in a 1968 speech where he reflects upon the civil rights movement, states, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." As a teacher, I've internalized this message. Every day all around us, we see the consequences of silence manifest themselves in the form of discrimination, violence, genocide, and war. In the classroom, I challenge my students to explore the silences in their own lives through poetry. We work together to fill those spaces, to recognize them, to name them, to understand that they don't have to be sources of shame. In an effort to create a culture within my classroom where students feel safe sharing the intimacies of their own silences, I have 4 core principles posted on the board that sits in the front of my class, which every student signs at the beginning of the year. Read critically, write consciously, speak clearly, tell your truth. I find myself thinking a lot about that last point, tell your truth. And I realized that if I was going to ask my students to speak up, I was going to have to tell my truth and be honest with them about the times where I failed to do so. So I tell them that growing up as a kid in a Catholic family in New Orleans, during Lent, I was always taught that the most meaningful thing one could do was to give something up. Sacrifice something you typically indulge in to prove to God you understand His sanctity. I've given up soda, McDonald's, French fries, French kisses, and everything in between. But one year, I gave up speaking. Figured the most valuable thing I could sacrifice was my own voice, but it was like I hadn't realized that I had given that up a long time ago. I spent so much of my life telling people the things they wanted to hear instead of the things they needed to. Told myself I wasn't meant to be anyone's conscience because I still had to figure out being my own. So sometimes I just wouldn't say anything, appeasing ignorance with my silence, unaware that validation doesn't need words to endorse its existence. When Christian was beat up for being gay, I put my hands in my pocket and walked with my head down as if I didn't even notice. Couldn't use my locker for weeks because the bolt on the lock reminded me of the one I had put on my lips when the homeless man on the corner looked at me with eyes up, merely searching for an affirmation that he was worth seeing. I was more concerned with touching the screen of my Apple than actually feeding him one. When the woman at the fundraising gala said, "I'm so proud of you. It must be so hard teaching those poor, unintelligent kids," I bit my lip because apparently we needed her money more than my students needed their dignity. We spend so much time listening to the things people are saying that we rarely pay attention to the things they don't. Silence is the residue of fear. It is feeling your flaws, gut-wrench guillotine your tongue. It is the air retreating from your chest because it doesn't feel safe in your lungs. Silence is Rwandan genocide. Silence is Katrina. It is what you hear when there aren't enough body bags left. It is the sound after the noose is already tied. It is charring. It is chains. It is privilege. It is pain. There is no time to pick your battles when your battles have already picked you. I will not let silence wrap itself around my indecision. I will tell Christian that he is a lion, a sanctuary of bravery and brilliance. I will ask that homeless man what his name is and how his day was, because sometimes all people want to be is human. I will tell that woman that my students can talk about transcendentalism like their last name was Thoreau. And just because you watch one episode of The Wire doesn't mean you know anything about my kids. So this year, instead of giving something up, I will live every day as if there were a microphone tucked under my tongue, a stage on the underside of my inhibition. Because who has to have a soapbox when all you ever needed is your voice? Thank you.
I can watch that Clint Smith talk, and it's just a beautiful, powerful 4-minute and 22-second message that reminds me that our talks don't have to be super long, but they can certainly be super impactful when it comes to that. And so for our students who sometimes watch TED Talks in the classroom and they see that they're 18 minutes, it's a little bit daunting to think that to put together an 18-minute talk. And in my own experience, I thought that the first time I did a TEDx talk in 2016, I think it was. No, 2017. No, 2016. It was very daunting, and I thought I had to put together something long. And in fact, when I go back on it, I think I would take about 6 minutes off of it to make it around 8 to 9 minutes. So that lesson that 2 years provides you also extends into my students, is that you don't need to pile and pile and pile the time on the talk when you can put together a very strong message in 4 or 5 minutes. And I think that takes the pressure off of them too, because it's hard as you're young to really develop it's a skill set that's constantly being developed. So using Clint Smith's talk for a number of reasons: how to find voice, how to speak up, how to speak with passion, and also the power of a short message is why I keep sharing that slide over and over. And Clint is an amazing, amazing educational candidate. I think he's at Harvard right now studying his PhD in education. So if you want to follow him, he's worthwhile following. So I updated the TED Ed lesson on another format. And I just need to take a second and let it get to you. Here we go. Oh, there, I made that mistake again. I hit share every time instead of presentate. Okay, I just want you to see this picture. So what I did was I took some pictures of some students, and they all signed TED Ed waivers, so that a long time ago. They're all in high school now and grown up. And this just shows you some of the amazing opportunities that we can have to connect and to share what they're passionate about. And that's the whole premise of what we're doing with TED Ed clubs, is it finds how to bring out the best ideas. It's continuously teaching one another. It's teaching, Melody writes, teaching me to smile and be patient. TED Ed has opened me up to possibilities that I never would have thought. And it just creates just what I would consider an amazing learners community. I look at each of these students here and know that they have all gone on to some leadership, to some great things in the schools that they've scattered to across the region, and that I know that they're going to take those skills and use them to work and serve with others in the future. So I just want to share, this is from our old club at Sam Chapman. The second part about this is, I said that how TED Ed clubs and how TED Ed can make students better, how it can make school better. Well, part 2 is basically about TED Ed lessons. And so if you've never heard of TED Ed lessons, today's your lucky day. Imagine finding a website with about 260,000 free lessons that have video content, questions, and it's customizable. And it allows you to interact and share with your students. For some schools, it's called a red tool. There are ways to make a red tool less red, more of a yellow, and manage student privacy and still be very useful for your classroom. But as a teacher, I've just enjoyed immensely creating lessons and sharing them and having them being taken by students from around the world. So that's what TED Ed lessons are, is part 2. So imagine your classroom, you want to create some content, you find a video from YouTube, and you can engage students in a new and interactive way using TED Talks or original TED Ed lessons. The neat part about this is it's pretty democratic. You can actually pitch a lesson, and if the TED Ed folks find it hasn't been made or can develop it, and you can develop that lesson, they will actually create an original animation about your lesson. It's probably on my bucket list to have a TED Ed original lesson, but in the meantime, I'm pretty content with having some of my lessons featured on their main website as a TED Ed Select lesson. My buddy Craig Zimmer in Pickering at St. Mary Catholic Secondary School has his very own TED Ed original lesson about Sparta. If you ever want to check it, just search for Zimmer and Sparta, and you'll find a great TED Ed lesson. So here's a little bit of a tour about the TED Ed website.
Right now, somewhere out there, there's an educator delivering a mind-altering lesson to their class.
I want to engage your brains in this. Try to get my head around how vast our Earth is.
But that lesson only reaches the students in that room. What would happen if we could capture that lesson?
This is a toothed wheel.
What if pro animators and visualization artists could bring that lesson to life?
It's an object we see every day. It will literally fit 1 million Earths. It's got a bunch of notches and it's got a bunch of teeth. This was Fizo's solution.
When that lesson lands, curiosity is ignited.
It seems impossibly big, but something interesting happens. In the great scheme of things, just a pinprick. A door is starting to close on the light beam that's coming back to his eye.
And that group of students is one thought closer to being what every teacher hopes their students will become, a lifelong learner.
Based on the distance between the 2 stations, the quest for knowledge and understanding never gets down, does it? He calculates the speed of light to within 2% of its actual value. The more you know, the more amazing the world seems.
That's the central mission of TED Ed, to capture to amplify the voice of the world's greatest teachers.
He does this in 1849.
It's the crazy possibility. It's the unanswered questions that pull us forward. So stay curious.
TED Ed is really an invitation to teachers all around the world to submit their best lessons.
We review each submission and we work with the educators to refine the lesson and make sure that they're less than 10 minutes long.
From there, we mail out these portable recording booths. A teacher pulls up their final lesson, presses record, and then can instantly share it with our animation team.
It's also an invitation to animators. We are looking for talented animators to get involved, submit their reels, and help us animate these incredible lessons.
Right now, there's a gifted educator somewhere out there delivering a life-changing lesson. The TED Ed team hopes that anyone who's passionate about education will help us find that teacher capture that moment and amplify it the way that it deserves to be amplified.
I should make a suggestion that I don't think they're sending out too many voiceover kits anymore, but that video is really just very empowering and inspiring. And on this presentation, there's another one on the next slide. I'm not going to show it to you at this moment, only because it's basically just another version of that, maybe a little more in-depth in other ways. So basically, to start a TED Ed lesson, you would just log into ed.ted.com and hit that old create a lesson button, and it goes from there. It's pretty straightforward how you can get to it. Here, this is what it'll show you. It'll say you can search for a video by subject, title, URL, or a YouTube specific link, and once you do that, you load it in, hit the return button, and then the most probable candidates will come up. I used my 3 Ways to Destroy the Universe select lesson as the video. It's obviously not content that I created, but it's a phenomenally well produced and enjoyable lesson that has been created by Kurzgesagt. And so just plug it in, it pops up, click on it. The next screen you see is the TED Ed lesson editor, and it basically has your video in a small frame. You can give it a title or alter the title, and it just starts there. You basically hit the Let's Begin section. You write a little mini essay. You only get so many characters about it, and once you do that, then you hit the Think section, and that's where you can kind of create questions based on the content of the video. There are basically 2 types of questions: short answer or multiple choice. Multiple choice could include ideas about or questions that are true-false questions. I change true-false quite a lot. I usually do no way or way. I also do absolutely or you got to be kidding me, in addition to true, false, and something to keep in mind as you write those multiple choice answers, that the language of the learners is not always English, that they may be English language learners themselves. So if you're writing a lesson, keep that in mind, that some of your viewers, if this lesson is being shared with other educators around the world, or maybe they are using your lesson to share with their classroom, how you structure that lesson and the language inside of it, it may be a consideration. So you want it to be as accessible to as many people as possible. And this is also a shout out to anybody that wants to create other lessons in languages that are not English. I'm currently working with a very dear friend, Rashmi Swar, who's a fellow TED Ed innovative educator, on a lesson that we are going to write in 2 languages, hopefully to share and create a broader awareness for not just a local issue, but a global issue in terms of water safety and water security. And that's taking a video from India, and we are with English subtitles, and I will write an English lesson and she will write a lesson in Hindi to go with it, and we can share like a bilingual lesson. So in Ontario, where I teach, we have French as a second language, and I work in a French immersion school in the York Region District School Board, that teachers could be creating lessons with French or Quebecois content and being able to share those amongst themselves. So imagine you're working on a lesson, say with a grade team, and you have all grade 5s, one's doing science and one's doing social studies, and how you put together, you kind of divvy up the different aspects of the unit, the different strands. Imagine then how you could create a body of, or a library of lessons for your students to share and share with other educators around. And then just imagine the approaches that we would have to have at that. Think about how we could lessen the amount of dependence on textbooks as well, or add this layer to the classroom now that we're becoming more digital and connected. The other aspect about a TED Ed lesson I've liked is I've used it as a flip. So I'll send the students home, say, hey, check out this lesson, come ready to discuss it tomorrow. I don't want you to answer it. I want you just to preview the content, be ready to chat about it, maybe make some notes. And then it sets the foundations for the next day's lesson. What I find about that is that the kids come with that if they've done their work, and it's a big if in some cases. If they've done it, it makes the lesson attainment so much better because they've already had access to the understandings one time prior. So neurologically, that apparently is a big thing. That helps out a lot. And so if that locks it in a little bit more, then we're getting better retention in terms of concepts when we do that, when we can flip a lesson and get the kids going. Other times I've taken a lesson and just used it in class, and in the discussion points or in the think questions, if I use a open answer, I actually write the student's response down, put their initials beside it, and then I have kind of an anecdotal record of their response and whether they're getting the concepts or not. So I could use that in the future. Finally, as you go forward through building a lesson, the dig deeper section is all about sharing resources, extra digging, well, obviously dig deeper, but sharing resources that will go with to accompany the lesson. It might be extra links. The discussion questions, again, can be your longer, your essay answers. And finally, it's optional. Any of these buttons are really optional, the dig deeper, the discuss, and finally. It's up to you whether you want to put them there. But I seem to want to write my lessons where it has all of them rather than exclude them. And finally, I just write a final note. I might even include some music that the lesson made me think of. So here's an example of a lesson that I've customized. Somebody else made this lesson, and now I'm currently customizing it. So right here, you'll see that on the bottom, you'll see from Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Kate Weaver is the original, the originator of the lesson. But if you look up here at the top, you'll see that it's now created by Will Gorley. I did not create the lesson. I'm basically flipping the lesson, and it will show up on Kate's TED Ed account as a customized version of her lesson. She won't have to, I will be able to get a unique URL that I share, and any students working on this lesson would then be under my umbrella of TED Ed in my dashboard. Here's another one here. So this is what I was telling you about, how the customized lesson, this is what it might look like. You'll see this on your lessons. This is one that has recently been shared, one of my lessons on the psychology of accents. And you can see here it's TED Ed Select, it's how many views it's had, how many questions are answered, how many times it's been customized, and it just shows you what a finished lesson would look like in the platform. Once that lesson is successfully done, you get your own link, and that's really important because then you can share it with your students, put it on your Google Classroom, and it basically is only people with that link can click on it. It's really not that, and you can even modify it so that it can't be modified afterwards, that no one else can customize your lesson, and it keeps it really kind of in your control. No one will alter your proprietary lesson. They will only customize it on their own terms and in their own account. So then once you finish the lesson, here's another one. It basically goes out there to the world. A TED Ed Select goes on the TED Ed Club or TEDEd.com website and is featured. And you'll notice that all the questions answered and so on. You'll get to a dashboard like this, and it'll show 44 students, 216 students, and just number of students that have taken that lesson. You may actually look at the segment here where it says review student work. So once that comes, I can actually look at who's done my lesson. That's just their name. It's just the amount of times they've tried a question, how successful they were in terms of first attempts. And then they have a chance where you can actually provide feedback. And I don't get to all of them because, look, 216 students that aren't even mine from schools around the world, or just people who are interested in that subject. I try to type in, hey, thanks for doing the lesson. I really liked your idea about this. And it's a really neat kind of global conversation. Okay. All right. So basically on a TED Ed lesson, you can take any of the lessons. It stores them in your own dashboard. You can see I've published 85 lessons. What's more interesting is I have 40 that are in draft mode. I'm really, really looking forward to trying to get some of these drafts done. It shows how many lessons I've actually completed by other people, how many lessons I've started, and then how many lessons I've viewed. So using the TED Ed dashboard is really helpful. You can see across the top there's lessons, any lessons you can access. The club, if you're a club leader, you can access your club content there. You can nominate educators. You'll see yourself here all and any notifications that you get. All right, and if you'd like to see the lessons that I've created, this link here at the bottom of this slide has a link to maybe 40 or 45 of my lessons. I've kind of updated it as of this morning, and hopefully tag them that they are, by subject and content. Some of it's PD, some of it's for spec ed, some of it's science. It just depends. Some days I feel like writing a lesson based on a song. I've done that before. It's pretty limitless as long as I can get a YouTube video of it. I'm going to use anything to access content so I can get it into the brains of my students on their terms. So as we go forward, we're wrapping up. I just figure if there's any questions, maybe this is the time to ask. I'm going to share with you some ways to get a hold of me, my social media and contact information. There's links here to my About Me, my Twitter, my blogs, 1, 2, 3, and my email. And the one thing I want to say is I appreciate that so many people have logged on to watch, and that maybe in the future that we could share more about TED Ed and student voice around the world. I would really appreciate any feedback you could offer, and hopefully we'll be able to hear about you having a TED Ed club of your own, and let me know how I can help, or how any of the TED Ed Innovative Educators, if you just click on the TED Ed Innovative Educator button, you will get to this site. Oh, there it is. That's pretty scary. Aren't you glad you were watching the other one? So if you see this, you can see a little bit about what it is to be a TED Ed Innovative Educator. Basically, we share TED Ed with everyone around the world. And in York Region District School Board, there are actually 2 of us, myself and Superintendent Rashmi Swarup, and close by is Craig Zimmer, and there are 2 other Canadian TED Ed leaders, one in Waterloo area and one in the Alberta area. So I hope that helps out what you're thinking, and we can get back to this beautiful moment where we wrap up. All right. Ta-da. So I hope you've had some time to take it all in, and that there was something informative here for you, and that we could maybe do this again sometime. Maybe if you have any questions, or you want your administrator to ask, have a little more information, feel free to share the slide deck that's attached to the bottom of the YouTube channel there. If you look at the YouTube Why TED Ed Clubs Make Better Students YouTube resource, you'll see the session resource that I shared with you through this hour. And if your administrator would like to ask any questions, or through you to me, I'm happy to respond to an email, to speak, Skype, Google Hangout, you name it. Come to your school, annoy your staff, annoy your students. It's basically what I do, and it's my pleasure to share it with you. So hopefully all's well, and I will send you off with one thought, maybe several thoughts, but that it's student voice is so important to me in so many ways. It was something that wasn't available when I was younger. Sure, we were just coming out of this, what we call the hippie movement, the free speech movement from the 60s, but it seemed to be tightened up a lot in the 70s and 80s. And then comes along this organization to really amplify that. And I think that as a teacher, seeing what that does and how that allows students to kind of come alive, I think that then it makes it all the while worth it to watch them grow, find their confidence, find their footsteps, find their path, and know that they are cared for and supported in a safe and encouraging environment. So There's the African proverb that I've used on a number of occasions that if we don't allow our youth access to the fire, they will set the village alight to feel what warm is. So bring them in, listen to them. You've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's a good ratio. And my mom taught me that one. And let them go. Let them speak their truth. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.